How many of you know about the folk fair that went on last week? Do you all know about that? Okay. How many of you know about the Milwaukee Admirals, who they are? Okay. How many of you know who the Marquette Warriors were? I say were, because they're now the Golden Eagles. How many of you know the Milwaukee Bucks? Okay. All right. With that in mind, I'm talking about the Milwaukee Arena. Now, this is a period between 1966, I believe, and again, I've been corrected 3 times on my last story, so I'll probably get a couple this time. 1966 and 1977, that's the period we're looking at. And we're looking at this picture back here, these 2 pictures back here. Now, originally I said this was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I've been corrected. This was not Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it's Lou Alcindor, because that's who he was when he was drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks in 1971. And this picture was probably taken in 1972. That's my guess, because this is Oscar Robertson. What?
It says 1972.
Oh, well, good. Then I was right. And I should read it, too. Anyway, this is Oscar Robertson, 2 of the greatest players in the history of basketball, but certainly up until just now, it's probably the 2 best players in the history of Milwaukee until now. And up here is a picture of Julius Erving, who was one of the greatest of his time, and he was a little later than this picture. And this is Junior Bridgman, who was a great Milwaukee Buck, and that's probably in the late 70s. What year does it say? 1982. Yeah, it's later. It's a later picture. Anyway, what I really want to talk about is the Milwaukee Arena, and the reason I asked you about those 4 events was because during that period, all of those events were held at the Milwaukee Arena, including the Folk Fair, by the way, in case you didn't know. I was there several times. It's a great place for it. Anyway, I wanted to start by talking about the arena, and I suppose a lot of you have been there. But if you come in from the south, you walk in, and you walk in up some steps and in the front, and if you walk through the opening there, it's as somebody said to me earlier today, you just look around, the top goes all the way to the bottom. You got a kind of a semi-oval bowl, and on the left, on the floor, were the opponents for basketball seats, and going down further was the home team. In those days, the Milwaukee Bucks were in the early 1970s. They were the elite of the National Basketball Association. We're debating as to what year they won the championship. Tom and I aren't sure. I thought it was 1972, but it could have been 73. They had Alcindor, they had Robertson, they had Bobby Dandridge, they had John McLaughlin, a Milwaukee favorite in terms of announcing. They were a great basketball team. The other basketball team that was a great basketball team, and by the way, I would guess they won the 2 teams, the Marquette Warriors and the Milwaukee Bucks probably won 90% of their games there. At one point, the Bucks won 66 out of 81 games, and the continued to win on and off for years. I love the pro game, and we went there. As I told the earlier group, we used to pay $8 to $10 to watch the Bucks. We used to pay. I was a student there, and I was from 1964 or 5 to 1970 something, 1 or 2 or 3. And I was in the law school and undergraduate school, and we used to pay like $4 for tickets, and half the tickets for the Marquette games were you got to sit behind the bench. And I was telling the earlier group there were some really fun things that you got to see in college basketball, different than you would see today. Dick Vitale, who is an announcer now on ESPN, if you ever watch ESPN basketball, he's been there forever, but he used to coach Detroit, and the wild thing, we were sitting across the way from him in the opponent's area, and he called a timeout, and he was a very loud, excited man. And in those days, they had 15 chairs lined up for the opponents to sit in. They were folding chairs, and they were tied 3 to 3 to 3, so there were 5 units. He went in the middle chair, and he took his foot and he kicked all the way down, so all the chairs went flying everywhere, and took him about 10 minutes. I think he must have gotten a technical foul for that. Anyway, the other person who is my all-time favorite person as it relates to basketball was Al McGuire. Everybody who's older has an Al McGuire story. I have one that I don't think anybody knows except a few of us. who were sitting behind the bench one night, and McGuire had called a timeout, and he was behind to Detroit. The game, I think it was 30-29 he was behind, but he was very unhappy, and he was screaming and yelling, and his team was standing there like this, and my future law partner and I were sitting there waiting for him to get over it, and all of a sudden we looked down at the end of the bench down there, and there was this basketball player standing down there, and his name was Gary Brell. And very honestly, I believe after he got out of college, he went to Alaska, and nobody's ever heard of him since he went to Alaska. Gary was an interesting character. He was from South Milwaukee, very good basketball player. So finally, McGuire got sick of standing there, and he was from New York, so he had a New York accent, and he looks down, and he looks at Brell, because you know he's not happy. And he walks in he always walked like this. And so he walked down to the end of the bench. He says, "Gary, what the hell is wrong with you?" And Brell looked up and says, "Coach, I had a fight with my girlfriend, and I don't really feel like playing." And McGuire looked rather red, and he said, "Is your girlfriend here?" He said, and Gary's looking up at the seats, and he says, "Oh yeah, Coach, she's right up there in the 14th row." McGuire looks up and he says, "Is Gary's girlfriend, would she please stand up?" So now this is in the middle of a college basketball game, so she stood up, and he says, "Will you please forgive Gary so we can play this game?" And she says, "Oh, okay, Coach. Gary, you're forgiven. Let's play the game." So that's why I love the arena. I had some of the most wonderful times of my life in the arena. So thank you.